I'm going to share with you the chapter from my book, or pieces of it. You'll have to get the book to read the whole thing. But pieces of the chapter of when I actually took sannyas on Ganga Dussehra Day 2000. The moon hung low in the sky as though perched on the ridge of the Himalayan foothills, slightly bigger than a half moon, but far from full. She illuminated the morning, into which twilight was now emerging. It was just past 3:30 a.m. I had been awake all night. That morning, as the sun would begin its ascent over the mountains, I was going to be initiated into sannyas. Layers of false self would be washed off me, and I would emerge from the waters of Ganga as a newborn child from the womb of the mother, untouched, untainted, unafraid. I would emerge as the unclothed fullness and truth of myself, whole, complete, pure, divine, a vessel through which God's will would flow, unencumbered by ego. I closed my eyes and chanted my mantra in my mind. The only sound was the waves of Ganga, rising slowly with the melting glacial snow, breaking on the steps and occasionally splashing over my bare feet. As I sat there, the waves began to flow, not only in front of me, but also through me, crashing on the steps of the marble and on the edges and corners of my being. I could hear and feel the water rushing into my mind, coursing through my thought patterns, loosening my hardened reactions and identities. I stood and wrapped a cotton shawl over my chest and shoulders, covering my now wet white cotton gown, and walked up the edge toward the room in the ashram where Swami Gurusharananandji Maharaj was staying. He had come especially for my sannyas initiation, graciously and lovingly, when I told him that I really, really wanted him to be there and to do the rites with Pujya Swamiji. I knocked on the door of Maharajji's room and his disciple answered. When he emerged, I bowed at his feet and he said, "Ao Rani, come, queen." In his presence, I felt less like a queen than an infant. But by using nicknames of that, Maharajji continually reminds us of who we really are. Not queen of some finite physical kingdom, but queen of the divine universe. He walked past me regally, and I stood and followed him up the central ashram pathway to the front door of Swamiji's room. Swamiji walked out silently. He moves with an unusual grace. I frequently find myself checking the ground to see if his feet are really touching, rather than gliding a few inches above the ground. He and Maharajji bowed lovingly to each other and walked side by side out of the ashram and down the marble steps to the water. Maharajji and Swamiji sat on the steps of the water's edge. "Hold the chain and take a dip," Maharajji instructed. "Again," he said as I surfaced from the first dip. It was an invocation, not a command. Maharajji wasn't simply instructing me to dip in the water. Rather, his words, the actions that followed, and the prayers that he and Swamiji chanted silently were part of an ancient, intricate initiation ritual. I wasn't just dunking my head in a river. I was being ordained. My ego reached out and tried to grab hold of anything that it could find inside of me. Fear, abandonment, abuse, desire, longing. Again and again, I dipped and let the waters carry me. Again and again, the current pulled me until I was floating horizontal in the water, arms outstretched toward the waning moon as she dipped behind the mountain. Again, he said, no longer speaking to me, but incanting the words of an ancient rite. 18 times I dipped in Ganga. 18 times she pulled me until I was bowing, face down in the water, toward her source, toward the womb of the mother. Maharaji spoke the Sanskrit lines softly. They were not meant for any comprehension. I already knew the vows that I was taking. When the ritual vows finished, Maharaji and Swamiji both rose silently and stepped down to the edge of the water. They took water in their right hands and each chanted silently to himself, holding the water in an outstretched cupped palm. Not a drop of water fell from either of their hands. After a few moments, they extended their fingers, tipped their hands, and offered the water back to Ganga. "Come here," Maharaji said, and I walked toward them as they turned to face the first rays of the sun reaching over the Himalayas. I stood before them, and I brought my hands together in prayer as I beheld the two masters' faces lit by the morning sun with Ganga flowing behind them. I could do nothing else. Maharaji chanted in Sanskrit, and they splashed the water from their hands onto my head. I was still dripping wet from the 18 baths in Ganga, so I was surprised by how strong the flow of these drops of water felt. A light spray of water on a soaked head really should be barely perceptible, but these drops landed with such force that each of them seemed to pass through my skull, past the sponge-like gray and white matter of my brain, and into the presence of my mind. With each drop, another thought pattern was washed away, like water bombs destroying the enemy's reserve banks. When the spray ceased, I bowed low on the wet marble steps, facing my two gurus. Then I sat up and opened my eyes, looking at them. Maharaji took Swamiji's hands and placed them on my head, covering them with his own, their 4 hands on my head. My eyes closed from the weight of the energy. The physical mass of their hands weighed next to nothing, but the energy was so strong, I felt the roof of my skull crumble under the pressure. The energy poured, unencumbered by the bones of my skull, into and through my brain and mind. My thoughts just stopped. I was still kneeling at their feet when I opened my eyes. I could hear Ganga flowing and the voices of people beginning to come to the water for their sacred bath. But these sounds did not enter me. The world swirled around me, but nothing budged inside. There was a tight chain, not the one I had to hold on to with my hands in Ganga, but a heavy, steady anchor that seemed to go through the center of myself, from their hands on my head to the waters of Ganga beneath me, the energy flowing downward, the energy rising up, and an axis of still, spacious energy running through the center of myself. SADHVI Bhagavati, Maharaji pronounced, and then said it again. I put on my new clothes, smiling at the embroidery in my new white sari. I had just renounced all attachment to form, all identification with the body. But the sweet woman from Delhi who brought me the new clothes to wear after the initiation had known it was a special occasion, and so she assumed that it deserved a special sari, one with delicate patterning and embroidery. I'll end here. There's so much more, but I want you to have the joy of sitting, holding the book, reading it, and feeling it. Feeling that inner transformation, that inner initiation in your own heart, in your own energetic field. Because it's actually an experience that all of us can have. Maybe not in exactly this way, but feel that powerful energy ordaining you. Maybe not into being a monk, but ordaining you into spiritual life, ordaining you into the presence of grace. So I hope that you've enjoyed the reading, and I hope that you enjoy sitting and reading the rest of that chapter and the rest of Hollywood to the Himalayas. And so, so, so much love to you all.